Hi ho, hi ho. I work in movies, so there's no new takes, it's all remakes. Hi ho, hi ho, hi ho, hi ho. Guys, I figured today we'd talk about Hollywood's remake problem, the lack of originality in new movies and entertainment, and the idea that we are focusing on the wrong things entirely when it comes to making new films. So I figured since it's spooky season and we all know what happened this year in movies, I'd do it dressed as Snow White. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, you better. Yeah, you better.
Guys, before we get into today's video, please like and subscribe. Yes, today we're talking about a multitude of things, starting with Hollywood's remake problem. I don't know about you, but nearly every time I go online, I see a new advertisement for a remake, a sequel, in addition to something that was made either super recently or a little while ago. And every time I watch the trailer or the promo or the casting, I'm thinking, this is not right. We're focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're telling the story from a new marginalized angle. We're essentially taking classics and these cherished pieces of media and just wokeifying them. And I attempted to make a list of all of the different pieces of media I could think of right off the top of my head that sort of fit in this category. And now I'm going to read it for you. Fantastic Four, Superman, Lilo and Stitch, Mulan, Wonka, The Little Mermaid, Snow White, of course, Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, Little Women, Harry Potter, Freaky Friday, Mean Girls, Legally Blonde, A Walk to Remember, Strawberry Shortcake, West Side Story, Aladdin, Narnia, Jurassic Park, Princess Diaries, My Best Friend's Wedding, The Devil Wears Prada. The list goes on, and I'm sure you guys are going to add the ones that I missed in the comments. And with these remakes and new iterations, I find myself wondering what the point is. They seemingly fall flat, and they're just used as vessels to, I don't know, insert diversity, equity, and inclusion into a project that we've already grown to know and love. And sometimes these projects are being made within the time span of what, like 10 years? When was the last Chronicles of Narnia? There's also that new Harry Potter series that's coming out that's supposedly going to feature a Black Snape and possibly a Tilda Swinton as Voldemort, which just, why? And who's asking for it? And seemingly no one is, yet it keeps happening and the story is always the same. We get a brand new Snow White remake in our year 2025 with a Snow White that doesn't quite look like Snow White and dwarves that don't quite feel like the ones from Snow White. In fact, we had the 7 magical diversity hires, but then everybody was so upset that this remake was being made in that way, let alone being made at all, that they decided to swipe the magical diversity hires and make CGI dwarves instead of hiring little people for the job. Snow White, being the fairest of them all, took on a new form as it no longer pertained to her looks or her character, but to the fact that her land was communist, I guess. The movie lost all its magic, all of its charm, all of Walt Disney's original vision, it seemed, but I guess it's not 1937 anymore?
No longer 1937. I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again. Weird.
The soft yet strong and demure feminine energy of the original Snow White was replaced by a belty girl boss, which is what everyone wanted, I guess.
And I will use the broom. He'll use the broom.
And this became a pattern at Disney. We watched as The Little Mermaid went through its own race-swapping controversy, but also as the story of Ariel turned from one of a young woman being saved by a prince and shown a new world to a young woman girl bossing and saving herself, proving that her narrative is the only narrative that needs to exist. Don't listen to daddy, and certainly don't be saved by Prince Charming. And then we have Lilo and Stitch that came out this year, another remake that shifted the original message of the film. Lilo and Stitch was once telling us that Ohana meant family, and family meant that nobody gets left behind. It showed us a young sister who was fighting for parental rights and guardianship over her younger sister after their parents' death. And in this new iteration, we watched as a girl boss eventually gave her sister up to the state to follow her own educational dreams. I guess Ohana's taken on a new translation and it now means foster care. And it's not just Disney. Many other corporations are engaging in their own remake, sequel, just lack of originality parade right now. Most notably with Netflix was the Avatar: The Last Airbender remake, which actually had the original creators step away due to the fact they were butchering the storyline completely. Now, when remaking this beloved show, Netflix decided they were going to tone down the sexism of certain characters, never mind the fact that the sexism and the bullying displayed by these characters is absolutely central to the storyline. It is something that we watch other characters throughout the series overcome consistently. They decided to broadcast this and many other changes to the original story. And I'm going to read you a quote from the creators of Avatar: Avatar: The Last Airbender in regard to how Netflix took on this remake and this live action telling. They say it might turn out to be a show many of you end up enjoying, but what I can be certain about is whatever version ends up on screen, it will not be what Brian and I had envisioned or intended to make, end quote. Now, does Netflix respond to this comment from the original creators? No, but they do publish their annual diversity report. Now, if you read some of these tables, it shows from 2018 to 2023, they are up 27.9% in percentage of underrepresented personnel above the line in series by year. When we go over to their leads and co-leads, they are up 58.1% in diversity. And when we move down to main cast and storytelling format by year, they are up 46.1% in diversity. So their priority is not necessarily storytelling or giving you any sort of new take, giving you any sort of sparkle, magic, something to go home with. Instead, they want to give you diverse faces on a screen. Doesn't matter what the screen's showing you, really. This is why we get news like that in reference to Narnia, which is being recreated by Greta Gerwig and produced by Netflix, where now Meryl Streep is in talks to play Aslan. Make it make sense. And of course, when we step away from the likes of Disney and Netflix, we are seeing this very same cultural stamp being placed elsewhere. You guys will remember the Amadeus movie, which in 1985 took home 8 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Actor. Well, it's now being made into a new limited series where Will Sharp is going to be playing Mozart. And do we see anything that's a little bit off about that? Much like in the case of Snow White or in the case of Snape in this new HBO Harry Potter series, I feel like we could have found a better person to play Mozart. And this is no shade on any of the actors. It's shade on these casting directors who know exactly what they're doing. They're trying to boost those DEI numbers, and instead of just making stories that allow for that to happen naturally, they're deciding to just stuff people into historical remakes or new movies where they don't quite fit the characterization of the character. I'm sure these people are wildly talented. In fact, in many of these movies, I go and watch them and I confirm that they are wildly talented, but let's put their talents in a place where they're best fit. And of course, the natural question is, why do you care? Why does anybody care? This is just a piece of media. It's a piece of entertainment. You can watch it if you want to watch it and don't if you don't. And that is exactly what ends up happening. But I think the reason that many people care is because they care for the original source material, the IP that created these wondrous projects that people have come to know and love. And within that source material are universal truths, themes, sort of deeper meanings that the original creator deeply thought about when creating this bit of entertainment and putting it out to the public. And now it seems like we have these gremlins in Hollywood in the writer's room who are taking these bits of source material and just completely ripping them to shreds, setting them on fire in a trash can in the room, and then wondering how we can just align with diversity, equity, and inclusion and marginalized communities, and how we can wokeify the message of whatever project they're working on.
Put a chick in it, make her gay!
This is why you get clips like this from the director of the Star Wars The Acolyte series, where she says she wants to tell like a lesbian tale when it comes to Star Wars because she didn't get that as a child.
Gosh, I would love to make something like this that is, for lack of a better term, Disney, meaning it's something that like my parents would have allowed me to see when I was younger as a queer person.
Gotcha.
But I would have been able to understand as a queer person, and I think I would have had a completely different life. And so I really was inspired by it and was like, God, I would love to make a story like this.
And since we're speaking of Star Wars, we have yet another clip of a female director in Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy talking about the fact that she wants to make men uncomfortable in her creations.
What is the balance of activating a force for change, but also trying to permeate that patriarchy, that power structure? And is that a part of the calculation of your art as well? And what's been the reaction to that?
Oh, absolutely. I like to make men uncomfortable.
Take those two messages and then juxtapose them with this clip of George Lucas, the original creator of Star Wars, talking about feminism, female heroes, and really the girl boss era that Hollywood is in right now.
He said, there's no women in the movies. I said, who do you think the heroes are in those films? What do you think Princess Leia was? She is the head of the rebellion. She's the one that's taking this young kid that doesn't know anything on this boisterous, I know everything guy who can't do anything, trying to save the rebellion with these clowns. She's the hero of the movie. And it's the same thing with Queen Amidala. Even though she has Jedi on her side, she was still a hero prime mover. You can't just put a woman in pants and expect her to be a hero. They can wear dresses, they can wear whatever they want. It's their brains and their ability to think and plan and be logistical. That's what the hero is.
And of course, since I'm dressed as Snow White, let's go ahead and compare it there. Here is Rachel Zegler doing PR for Snow White and talking about whether or not Snow White's going to be saved by the prince.
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
And mind you, this was Walt Disney's first ever full-length animated feature. The amount of time and just painstaking energy he put into this film is just unimaginable. He goes back to reference this film and says the only way in which he can think about it are areas in which he could improve this film. If he ever found something wrong in the animation or in the storyline, he would snatch it back and recreate it. And in reference to this film, he says, quote, "Laughter is timeless, imagination has no age, and dreams are forever." There you have three timeless philosophies and somewhat lifelong prescriptions as to how one should see the world. Laughter is timeless, imagination has no age, and dreams are forever. Meanwhile, from the lights of Rachel Zegler, you get she's not going to be saved by the prince, because that's what life's all about. These original classic creators were so consumed with the idea that these projects would literally immortalize them and their philosophy, and if not them and their philosophy, the stamp that they wanted to be placed on the world in time to come if people were to ever come across these projects. That's why you're going to see universal themes and human truths. You're going to see great struggles communicated across different age frames, different religions, different backgrounds, geographies. And it becomes abundantly clear in looking at the writings and the quotes from these individuals who created the classics that we love that imagination was the central force driving everything that they ever did. That's why in the 1971 version of the film Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, we get this amazing song, one of my favorite songs of all time, titled Pure Imagination, where he talks about coming into a world of just simply pure imagination.
There's no life I know to compare with pure imagination. Living there, you'll be free.
In Pure Imagination, he talks about things defying explanation and the idea that within the confines of your mind exists just an infinite reality where in your imagination you can create anything. And if you want to change the world, you may not be able to do so outwardly, but you can do so within the confines or lack of confines of your imagination. Which is why we also get ideas like this. Hayden Christensen recalls going on a walk with George Lucas when filming Revenge of the Sith, where he says, "George ended the conversation by saying to me, 'Hayden, you can't change the world. It's not possible. All you can do is try to make your own world and then invite other people to be a part of it. It was one of the most profound things that anyone has ever said to me, and it has really informed the way I live my life," end quote. And that's what we're really talking about here with all these different projects and pieces of entertainment. We're talking about new worlds that were created, and they were created with purpose. It can be said for Star Wars and Star Trek and Snow White and Game of Thrones, and it can also be said for a project like that of Lord of the Rings. J.R.R. Tolkien, the creator of Lord of the Rings, had his very own views on imagination and a term that he called subcreation, meaning that human beings were endowed by their creator with the ability to create, and one of those creations would be secondary worlds that they would come up with in their minds. And one of the ways in which human beings could glorify their creator was by creating, which is what he did with Lord of the Rings. This sort of reverence for creativity and creation was seemingly lost when whoever the group was that got together to create the Rings of Power got together. But hey, we have black elves, dwarfs, and hobbits, and we spent like $1 bazillion on it. So that's cool. Of course, Rings of Power is by and large viewed as a failure when it comes to adaptation and reiteration, but Peter Jackson managed to do it, and he did it successfully. And I'm going to turn to him when he talks about how.
Did you have some kind of mechanism in a sense so that you could make sure that you were true to Tolkien?
Well, we didn't want to put any of our own, certainly in terms of the thematic material, we didn't want to put any of our own baggage. I mean, we had no interest in putting our messages into this movie, but we thought that we should honor Tolkien by putting his messages into it. And we thought he cared about things. The countryside and the rise of evil, and he cared passionately about certain issues. And we thought what we should do to honor him is to make sure that what he cared about ends up in the movie. That's what we tried to do.
As you can tell, this video could go on for hours upon hours, and I'm not going to do that to y'all today. We're going to close out with our central thesis, which is essentially that we are now more concerned with critique than creation. We find ourselves making these remakes, new iterations, and sequels with the idea that we can improve upon what we've already seen, a timeless classic that has somehow landed itself in the laps of people here in 2025, despite the time when it was made. And we look at these timeless classics or the things that we've come to enjoy, and we try to think to ourselves, what's wrong with them? How can we improve upon them? What sort of political messages were they missing? How little diversity did they have? And how can we inject all of that into a new recreation of this? And we're not asking ourselves what we lose in the process. We're not asking ourselves whether or not we have reverence for the original source material. In fact, it doesn't seem like we're really looking over the original source material at all. It seems as though we're wading in shallow waters, and shallow means are going to bring you shallow ends. If you cannot dive deep enough to even understand the central themes, messages, and struggles of an original piece of material, you cannot dive deep enough to recreate that bit of material. You should be kept up at night over the central ideas of the original piece of material that you are going to be recreating. You should be agonizing over the fact it was so successful and wondering exactly why. For if these things can strike a chord with generations and generations to come, you should wonder, am I capable of doing the same thing? You should not be agonizing over your girl boss quota, your diversity quota, your injected political themes, the idea that this must translate to non-binary and trans people, communist themes, the list goes on and on and on. Hollywood's new idea of originality seems to be, how many original ways can I say the same damn thing over and over and over again? I've been thinking to myself recently, what are going to be the classics of this generation? And I've been trying to really come up with answers, and maybe I'll put some of my answers on the screen for you to see right now, and we can judge against yours. But I find it hard to believe that we're truly coming out with that many heavy hitters that are going to stamp a name on this generation. Seriously, what is the mark of this generation in filmmaking and entertainment other than the ushering in of wokeism into film and films made for, as one of my favorite YouTubers on this topic would say, critical drinker, modern audiences.
Modern audiences.
We need ingenuity and creativity and imagination, and it seems as though many, if not all of those things, are completely antithetical to wokeism. And that's what I've learned in doing this deep dive into movies and remakes and just the shallow nature of modern filmmaking. And I do want to say there have been plenty of really great modern films that have come out, and I've enjoyed them. I'm not going to shit on everything that's been created in the past, 10, 15 years, but we do have a cultural stamp being created at this very moment in time. And one of those stamps is just wokeism and indoctrination and superficial movie recreations. So guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this entire topic. Drop it in the comments down below. Let me know how you feel. Let me know the things that I missed. And if you disagree with anything said in this video, do get out, but do so respectfully. I encourage healthy debate on this channel. And if you like this video, like, subscribe, click the notification bell to be notified every single time I post a video for you guys, which is every day. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye.
Yeah, you better. Yeah, you better.